Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The rain hammered against Maya's apartment window, like tiny fists demanding entry. She pressed her face against the cool glass, watching the storm turn the quiet suburban street into a river of regret. Her car sat in the driveway, engine silent, a casualty of her neglect and the mechanics. Honest assessment that it would cost more to fix than it was worth. Perfect timing, she whispered to herself, glancing at the clock. Her job interview was in 45 minutes, and the bus route to downtown had been suspended due to flooding. 3 months of unemployment had led to this moment, this opportunity. At the marketing firm she'd dreamed of joining. And now, it seemed the universe had other plans. Maya had always believed that life had a way of testing you just when you thought you had everything figured out. At 28, she'd thought she understood the rules. Work hard, be kind, and good things would follow. But the past year had taught her that sometimes good things slip through your fingers like water, leaving you standing in the rain, wondering where you went wrong. The sound of a car door slamming cut through her thoughts. She peered through the rain-streaked window and saw him, David Chun, her neighbor from 2 houses down. Even through the storm, she could make out his tall frame as he jogged toward his front door, briefcase held over his head like a shield. Maya had lived in this neighborhood for 2 years, and in all that time, she'd exchanged perhaps a dozen words with David. He was the kind of man who seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, always rushing somewhere, always looking, like he was solving problems that mattered. Maya knew he was married to Elena, a petite woman with kind eyes who worked as a nurse at the children's hospital. They seemed like the perfect couple, the kind that made you believe in lasting love when you passed them on their evening walks. Eleanor's hand tucked into the crook of David's arm, both of them laughing at some private joke. As Maya watched, David paused at his door, keys in hand, and looked back toward the street. For a moment their eyes met across the distance and the rain. Even from her window, she could see him hesitate, as if he was deciding something important. Then he was running again, not toward his house, but toward hers. The knock on her door came 30 seconds later. Firm, but not demanding. Maya's heart did something strange in her chest, a flutter that had nothing to do with the storm outside, and everything to do with the man standing on her porch, rain dripping from his dark hair. Maya? His voice was deeper than she remembered, warm despite the chill in the air. I saw your car. Are you okay? She opened the door wider, suddenly aware of how she must look. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing the same oversized sweater she'd been living in for 3 days. I'm fine, just car trouble, it's nothing. David's brown eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her feel like he could see through her careful words to the panic beneath. You look like you need to be somewhere. I have a job interview. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Downtown, in 35 minutes. I was just trying to figure out how to get there without a car in this storm. Something shifted in David's expression, a softening around his eyes that made Maya's breath catch. I can drive you. Oh no, I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He stepped closer, and Maya caught the scent of his cologne. Something subtle and masculine that made her think of late nights and quiet conversations. I was heading downtown anyway for a client meeting. It's not out of my way. Maya knew she should say no. She knew that accepting rides from married neighbors was the kind of thing that led to complications she couldn't afford. But the clock was ticking, and this job could change everything. Are you sure? The weather is terrible. I'm sure. David's smile was small but genuine, and Maya felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Give me 5 minutes to grab my umbrella and we'll go." As she watched him jog back to his house, Maya wondered if she was making a mistake. She'd spent the last year rebuilding her life, learning to depend on herself, promising she wouldn't let anyone else have the power to hurt her. But there was something about David that felt different, something that made her want to trust again. 20 minutes later, Maya found herself in the passenger seat of David's sleek sedan, watching the familiar streets of her neighborhood blur past through rain-streaked windows. The car smelled like leather and coffee, and soft jazz played from the radio, creating an intimate atmosphere that made Maya hyper-aware of every breath, every glance. "So," David said, his hand steady on the steering wheel despite the challenging driving conditions. "What's the interview for?" "Marketing coordinator at Brennan and Associates." Maya tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "I've been between jobs for a while now. Brennan and Associates is a good firm. I know Tom Brennan from the Business Association." David glanced at her, and Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What happened with your last job?" Maya hesitated. She'd practiced this answer dozens of times, but somehow, sitting in David's car, with rain drumming on the roof and his attention focused entirely on her, the rehearsed words felt inadequate. "Layoffs. The company downsized, and I was one of the casualties. I'm sorry. That must have been difficult." There was something in his tone, genuine sympathy without pity, that made Maya's carefully constructed walls crack just a little. "It was. I'd been there for 5 years, thought I had job security. Turns out there's no such thing." "No," David agreed quietly. "There isn't." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the storm outside creating a cocoon of intimacy inside the car. Maya found herself studying David's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against the steering wheel. In time with the music, she wondered what he was thinking, what kind of problems kept him awake at night. "Can I ask you something?" David's voice was careful, measured. "Are you happy?" The question caught Maya off guard. She'd expected small talk about the weather or the neighborhood, not this sudden dive into territory that felt personal, dangerous. "What do you mean?" "I mean ... David paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I see you sometimes, when I'm leaving for work in the morning. You water your plants on the front porch and you always look so ... thoughtful. Like you're thinking about big things." Maya's heart did that fluttering thing again. She hadn't realized anyone noticed her morning routine, certainly not David. "I suppose I am thinking about big things. About what comes next, what I want my life to look like." "And what do you want it to look like?" Maya turned to look out the window, watching the city skyline emerge through the rain. "I want it to matter. I want to do work that means something. Love someone who sees me, really sees me. I want to stop feeling like I'm waiting for my real life to begin." She felt David's gaze on her, warm and assessing. "You're not waiting for anything, Maya. You're living it right now." Something in his voice made her look at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. There was an intensity there, a hunger that had nothing to do with the storm outside and everything to do with the woman sitting beside him. For a moment, Maya felt like she was balanced on the edge of something vast and uncertain. "David," she said softly, and his name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her pulse quicken. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "I know this is complicated. You're married." "I am." The words seemed to cost him something. "Elena is a good woman. She deserves better than a husband who can't stop thinking about his neighbor." Maya's world tilted. "You think about me?" David pulled into the parking garage of her interview building, But instead of stopping at the visitor spaces, he drove to the top level where they were alone except for the rain and the grey morning light. He turned off the engine and turned to face her fully. "I think about you all the time," he said simply. "I think about the way you sing when you're working in your garden, how you always leave books on your front steps for the mail carrier to borrow. I think about how you never seem to realize how beautiful you are, how you light up when you talk about something you care about." Maya's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "David, you can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it's inconvenient. Because it complicates things." He leaned closer, and Maya could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Some things are worth complicating your life for." "What about Elena?" Pain flickered across David's face. "Elena and I, we've been living like roommates for the past year. We're both good people who somehow forgot how to be good for each other. She knows it too, even if we haven't said it out loud." Maya wanted to ask more, wanted to understand how two people who looked so perfect together could be falling apart behind closed doors. But the clock on the dashboard reminded her that she had 12 minutes to get to her interview. "I have too." "Go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know." David's hand found hers, his fingers warm and solid. "But Maya, after your interview, would you let me take you to lunch? I know a place where we can talk without the whole world watching." Maya knew she should say no. She knew that lunch would lead to conversations, that would lead to feelings, that would lead to choices she wasn't sure she was ready to make. But looking into David's eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the hope, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she said. "Yes." David's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "I'll wait for you in the lobby." Maya walked into the Brennan and Associates building feeling like she was floating. The interview, which she'd been dreading for weeks, suddenly felt like a formality. Her real life, the one she'd been waiting for, was happening in a parking garage, with a man who thought about her when she wasn't looking. The interview went better than she'd dared hope. Tom Brennan was a kind man in his 50s who seemed genuinely interested in her ideas and experience. They talked about marketing strategies and brand development, and Maya found herself relaxing, letting her passion for the work show through. "Have to ask," Tom said as they wrapped up. "David Chen mentioned you might be interviewing with us." "How do you know David?" Maya's cheeks warmed. "He's my neighbor. He gave me a ride this morning because of the storm. David's a good man. He's one of the most ethical lawyers I know, which is saying something." Tom's expression grew thoughtful. "He spoke very highly of you. Said you were exactly the kind of person we needed on our team." "He did. Called me this morning, actually. Said if we didn't hire you, we'd be making a mistake." Tom smiled. "I don't usually make hiring decisions based on recommendations from friends, but after meeting you, I can see why he was so enthusiastic." Maya walked out of the building an hour later with a job offer and a head full of questions. David had called Tom Brennan about her. When had he done that? And why? David was waiting in the lobby as promised, reading a newspaper and looking perfectly composed, except for the way his leg bounced nervously under the table. When he saw her, he stood, quickly, his eyes searching her face. "How did it go?" "I got the job." Maya's voice was still filled with disbelief. "I got the job, David." His smile was radiant. "Of course you did. You're brilliant. Tom Brennan said you called him about me this morning." David had the grace to look embarrassed. "I may have mentioned that I knew someone perfect for the position." "When?" "You've barely spoken to me before today." "I've been watching you for 2 years, Maya. I know more about you than you think." David's eyes were serious now. "I know you stay up late reading on your porch because you like the way the streetlight falls across the pages. I know you buy groceries for Mrs. Patterson when she's too sick to go out. I know you volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends because I've seen you loading dogs into your car. Maya stared at him. You've been watching me? Not watching, noticing. There's a difference. David reached for her hand. Come on. Let me buy you lunch and I'll explain everything. The restaurant David chose was small and intimate, the kind of place where conversations happened in hushed tones and the lighting was forgiving. Maya ordered soup she didn't taste while David told her about his marriage, his work, his dreams. That had somehow gotten lost in the routine of everyday life. Elena and I met in college, he said, his fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. We were both pre-med then, both convinced we were going to change the world. But life has a way of changing your plans. What happened? Nothing dramatic. No big fight, no betrayal. We just drifted. I went to law school, she went into nursing. We bought a house, settled into routines. Somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other as people and started seeing each other as roles to play. Maya thought about her own failed relationship, the way love could erode so gradually you didn't notice until it was gone. That must be lonely. It is. But you know what's worse than being lonely with someone? Realizing you've been sleepwalking through your life. Going through the motions without ever really living. Is that what you've been doing? David's eyes met hers across the table. Until this morning. Until I saw you standing at your window, looking like you were about to cry. And I realized I couldn't just keep driving past your life without being part of it. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. David, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the reason someone's marriage ends. You're not the reason, Maya. You're the wake-up call. The reminder that life is supposed to feel like something more than just surviving from one day to the next. They talked for 3 hours. About everything and nothing. Maya learned that David had wanted to be a writer before law school. That he still kept a journal, and sometimes wrote poetry he never showed anyone. David learned that Maya had been engaged once to a man who loved the idea of her more than her actual self, and that she'd been afraid to trust anyone since. What are you afraid of? David asked as they lingered over coffee, neither wanting the afternoon to end. Getting hurt again. Hurting someone else. Making choices I can't take back. What if I told you that some choices are worth the risk? Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not just the handsome neighbor who'd rescued her from the storm, but a man who was as lost as she was, as hungry for something real. What are you asking me, David? I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you what it feels like to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved for exactly who you are. His voice was soft but certain. I'm asking you to take a risk on something that might be extraordinary. Maya's heart was racing. She thought about her empty apartment, her careful routines, her safe, predictable life. Then she thought about the way David had looked at her in the car, like she was something precious and surprising. She thought about the job offer in her purse, the possibility of a new beginning. Okay, she said finally. But I have conditions. Name them. No lies, no secrets. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly. Agreed. And you have to talk to Elena. Whatever's happening between you two, she deserves to know the truth. David nodded, his expression serious. I'll talk to her tonight. And David? Maya reached across the table to take his hand. I need you to be sure. Really sure. Because I'm not looking for a fling or a distraction. I'm looking for something real. So am I, David said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I've been looking for something real my whole life. As they left the restaurant, the storm had passed, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming in the afternoon sun. Maya felt like she was seeing everything with new eyes, The way the light caught in David's hair, the way he held the door for her, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. "Can I drive you home?" David asked, and Maya heard the question beneath the question. "Yes," she said, "but just to drive me home. I need some time to think about all of this." "Of course." David's smile was understanding. "I'll wait as long as you need." The drive back to their neighborhood was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the morning's drive. This silence was full of possibility, of words unspoken but understood. When David pulled into Maya's driveway, he turned to face her. "Maya, about this morning, about everything that's happened today." "Don't," Maya said softly. "Don't apologize. Or take it back. Today was the first day in a long time that I felt like myself again." "Good," David said, "because I have no intention of apologizing for the best day I've had in years." Maya leaned over and kissed his cheek, a soft, brief touch that somehow felt more intimate than anything they'd shared. "Thank you, David, for the ride, for the job recommendation, for seeing me. Thank you for letting me." Maya watched from her front porch as David drove the short distance to his own house. She saw Elena's car in the driveway, saw the light in the kitchen window. Tonight, David would have the conversation that would change everything for all of them. As she unlocked her front door, Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Tom Brennan, welcoming her to the team and asking her to start Monday morning. She had a job, a chance at a new life, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at the kind of love she'd stopped believing was possible. But as she settled into her quiet apartment, Maya knew that the hardest part was still ahead. Tomorrow David would have to face the consequences of the choice he'd made today. Tomorrow, Elena would have to confront the reality that her marriage was over. And Maya would have to decide if she was brave enough to build something new on the foundation of someone else's ending. She thought about the way David had looked at her in the car, the way he'd said her name like it was something sacred. She thought about the job offer that had seemed impossible that morning, the way doors had opened just when she'd needed them most. Maybe David was right. Maybe some choices were worth the risk. Maybe some chances were worth taking, even when you couldn't see how the story would end. Outside her window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Maya made herself a cup of tea and settled into her reading chair, the same chair where she'd sat that morning, feeling hopeless and alone. Now, 12 hours later, everything had changed. She had a job, a future, and a man who saw her for who she really was, but she also had questions that would keep her awake tonight. Wondering if she was making the right choice. Wondering if love was worth the complications it brought. As darkness fell over the neighborhood, Maya saw David's silhouette. In his kitchen window, saw him pacing as he talked on the phone. She wondered if he was talking to Elena, if he was finding the words to explain how everything had changed in the space of a single storm. Maya's phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for today. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that meeting meeting you was worth everything. Sleep well." Maya smiled, her heart full of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She typed back, "Thank you for seeing me." Sweet dreams. As she got ready for bed, Maya thought about tomorrow, about the conversation David would have with Elena, about the choice she would have to make. She thought about the job she would start Monday, the new life she was building, the possibility of love that felt real and lasting. The storm had passed, but Maya knew that the real weather was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring sunshine or more rain, clarity or confusion. But tonight, for the first time in months, Maya fell asleep not to the sound of her own worry, but to the memory of David's voice saying her name like a prayer. In the morning, She would wake to find a single white rose on her doorstep. No note attached. But Maya would know who left it, and she would know that some stories were worth the risk of living them, even when you couldn't see the ending. The beginning, she realized, was sometimes the most beautiful part of all.